Fanatic Zeal is a rogue-lite hack-and-slash game made by ETA ONM 256 in Unity Engine and released on an MIT license. It was offered to me via Curator Connect and had a very short download time. It's easy to see why, considering it launches in a smallish window about half the size of my screen and doesn't do full screen, and the graphics are as basic as they need to be to get the point of the game across. You can bring the game into full screen, per se, by dragging the edges of the window out, but your mouse can still escape the window into your toolbar, which happened to me a couple of times and led to my player going idle in the game. This also means that a lot of this I recorded in small window mode, so you're gonna have to make friends with the black sidebars from time to time. It launches you into a tutorial, telling you it's left mouse to move, right mouse to normal attack the enemy you're hovering your mouse over, and if you run away for a while and don't get hit, your health will regenerate. Your HUD shows you the amount of manpower and gold you have in the top left, a map and indicator of distance to the level goal in the top right, your health bar and what level and stage you're on at the bottom, and also circles for your QWE skill timers. Through a combination of the tutorial and the simply written out game manual on the main menu, it was explained to me that the purpose of the game was to get yourself to the end of 5 levels to win, and you use a mix of your normal and special attacks to do so. There's no ending to the game at the moment, by the way, so winning just takes you to the leaderboard screen, and there's an online leaderboard for each mode of the game. Your normal attacks build up a focus meter, which allows you to perform a crit on your next QW or E skill attack when full. Along the way you would encounter bosses, purple people, who have their own traits that you can see by their description above their health bar. These bosses give you gold when you beat them, and you get more the faster they're defeated. If you take too long, you get nothing. The further through the game you get, the more traits the enemy bosses have, going from maybe 1 or 2 to several. In the levels you find treasure chests, which offer you a selection of abilities. Some of these abilities change the special abilities that you have in QW and E, replacing them with something else. Your standard 3 attacks are a stun, a circular strike, and blasting out fire for the swordsman, but these get overwritten with other abilities that you pick up. You can also access abilities by the shop at the end of the levels. You'll get a random selection there as well, some costing more than others depending on their effectiveness presumably, which you can re-roll for a cost if you don't like. There are a plethora of options, including things like a magic blast when your focus meter hits 100%, shock damage with normal attack, speed buffs to the people around you for each hit you get when performing a skill, increased damage in general. There are tons. And there's no limit to how many of them that you can have. Most of them apply only to you and not the rest of your army. You have to manage your manpower as you play the game. Since the more men you lose, you have to pay 100 gold for 100 men at the end of a level to restock, and if you reach 0 manpower you lose the run entirely. If you yourself die, that knocks 100 manpower off your maximum in one swoop. There's an option to go back to the main menu whilst in play, but otherwise there's not much more to it. There's a normal and hard mode of the campaign, and you can play as either a swordsman or an archer. The tutorial is as a swordsman, but the archer is not very difficult to pick up since the controls are the same. As said, there are 5 levels which vary in environment and background music. The first is like a castle kind of area, the second is a desert, the third is like a cave or a dungeon, the fourth is a snowy mountain, and the fifth is a volcano kind of thing with lava, I think. I'm going to preface my critiques of this game by saying that this is the first game of this nature I've ever played, and so some of the things I might pick up might just be inherently features of games like this. If that's the case, then let me know, but the points I'll follow with are likely still going to be valid. To me, whilst playing this, there feels like a singular crux of winning or losing. It's RNG. The RNG aspects of the items that you can get is essentially the sway between if you win or lose. If you get a bad pick, you're screwed. There is some personal responsibility to the game in that it's incumbent on you not to get caught up in the fight and die, because if you die then you've handicapped yourself 100 manpower, and essentially you have 9 to 10 deaths before you lose the run completely. Even if you die a few times, every time you die you cost yourself 100 coins to buy back the manpower you just sabotaged, and it's very rare that you come away from a level with enough coins to afford to replace a significant loss. That's under the assumption that you're the only one to die and not your manpower as well. Chances are, if you've died that many times in a level, you're on a back foot, which means you're also likely to be losing more manpower and therefore needing more money. The game structure essentially means that a slip-up can lead you down an inescapable spiral of failure. You need manpower to survive the level. To avoid losing manpower, you yourself need to take part in the battle as much as possible. Enemy bosses will churn through your manpower like a speed eater through an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you can do the same to the normal enemies. The less time your men are engaged with the enemy, the less likely you are to lose them. What does that mean? It means you need good buffs and abilities. If you have good buffs, the enemy bosses die faster, and you get more money yield from the level whilst also retaining as much manpower as possible. This means when you reach the end of the level, you don't have to spend as much money on manpower replenishment, and you can spend the remainder on even more and even better buffs to take into the next level, making you superbly powerful. This is usually the setup to a winning run, since on the couple I managed to complete, I was killing bosses in seconds, wading through armies like butter, losing maybe 200 to 300 men max, but was taking away 1,500 in coins to the post-level shop, and being able to fill my manpower and buy every buff with money left over, or even reroll. Conversely, you can tell a losing run very quickly by the same rule. If you end up falling behind, you'll take longer to kill bosses. That means you take away less money, or even none at all. The more time the boss is active, you lose more manpower, so you need to spend more at the end on them. And on losing runs, you end up in the post-level shop in a terrible state. You either don't have enough money to replace your manpower, which is the equivalent of moving onto a harder level with a shorter health bar, and to boot you can't afford any more buffs, meaning you're no stronger than when you struggled in the last level. Or you can afford your manpower or no more buffs, or maybe just one, but it's still not enough. There's a reroll option in the shop, but obviously you have to be able to afford it. It's too expensive most of the time unless the RNG gods have blessed you. If you gain 800 gold from a level and need 300 to replace your manpower, that's 500 left. 300 to reroll means you can buy max 2 abilities for 100 each, or 1 ability for 200, compared to the 3 to 5 abilities you might be able to buy depending on price if you hadn't rerolled. And there's no guarantee that the reroll will be better, since it's also RNG. You also have to make the choice between putting money down for buffs or trying to save money over in case you don't get as much yield off the next level, because that may be the difference between you being able to afford that manpower you need that you didn't quite get enough money in the level for, or being able to afford one more buff perhaps. But as I said, that's usually a recipe that you're on a downward spiral. Arguably doing that is just prolonging the inevitable. That's just the basic planning mechanics of the game. There are even more things within it that work against you, for example the level layouts and the enemy boss abilities. I'll talk about this in the context of playing as the swordsman because there is a noticeable difference between the two. First of all, to play as the swordsman you have to be at the front of the pack. Melee means you have to be face to face with the enemy to land a normal attack. An ability may be able to be used from a distance, but as said before with the focus meter mechanic, you have to normal attack to build focus to then make your special attacks do more damage. You could just spam special from behind the lines, but they'll be weaker. As said, your buffs only apply to you apart from a couple of specific ones, so you also have to be aware that being faster than your army, you shouldn't run away from them and get caught on your own, because it's very unlikely that even a large amount of buffs can save you from an enemy boss and army solo. You'll die uber quick. The melee fact alone means that to heal you have to run away from the front lines and leave your army to fight on their own. None of your buffs are helping them in those moments. They are raw and vulnerable to the enemy bosses. Keep that in mind. When talking about the level layout in this context, one particularly stands out. The third level, the KV dungeon-y thing, is the absolute worst in two ways. First of all, they introduce a ton of archers and ballista into this level, which can shoot you across wide open gaps and from a huge range whilst you can't reach them. Your special may have distance, but it's unlikely to have enough damage to kill them, and waiting for the timer to reset just gets you shot. The corridors are all very narrow, meaning the ability to escape to heal is slim. If you run away from the front line, you're often blocked by the sheer weight of your own army, and that led to me dying way too many times. I tried to retreat, but just got blocked. Similarly, after healing, having to barge through their bodies meant I was delayed in getting back to the fight, causing more of them to die. Some of the archers stun or slow you too, particularly the bosses, stopping you retreating and dealing damage whilst you're stuck. The archers also mean that you have to run even further away from the front line to recover health, because you only regenerate if you haven't taken damage for a set amount of time, so if any of them land a hit on you, your regen delay is reset and it takes you even longer to get back whilst all your manpower dies. In this level also there's an enemy boss that can teleport. Thank you, game, for advising me to retreat to regenerate health, but that's absolutely useless when the enemy can appear 3 feet from me, stun me, and then hit me with a combo attack, and every time I try to run away from it to not get stunned and trapped, I get blocked by my own army, or there's not enough physical floor for me to be able to go anywhere. Oh, and the enemy is immune to damage before he attacks. Did I mention that? Yeah, you can't kill him before he gets to you, stuns you, and mauls you. Because he doesn't take damage, the only way to beat him is to run away and let your men kill him when he runs away before teleporting back to you again, or try and stun him after he's done attacking and land a hit. After he finishes his combo attack and actually becomes hittable, he runs away from you and he has increased speed from normal. If you've dodged him, you're often too far away to catch up and melee hit him, even if you have increased speed before he teleports again. To add insult to injury, the fact you have to dodge him essentially means it takes a while to kill him, so you get little to no money out of him either a lot of the time. Disgusting. Some bosses are melee themselves, so you can try standing toe to toe with them, which isn't too bad. But in the 4th level you also get wizards who run away from you and hide at the back of their army whilst they blast you with area of effect magic attacks, and every time you try and get near them they just run off. So unless you're on a super powered run and burn through their army insanely quick, you also get not much money out of them either. The bosses seem not to be RNG. I think in all the times I tried they always had the same abilities, so at least you know what you're expecting, even if there's absolutely nothing you can do about it given your terrible choices of buffs. There are some that are utter killers to the melee combat style. The teleporting unhittable stun AoE man is sure one of them, but any form of stun or paralysis attack from the enemy is murder to try and deal with. There's an archer at the end of the desert who has stun arrows and teleports. So you try and melee him, he vanishes, stuns you, lets his army beat you up, and then just keeps shooting you from a distance. I had to try and stun him in return to keep him still, but it took several attempts and I was never doing enough damage. He can teleport long distance and still hit you, and you're just a fish in a barrel ready to get stunned and laid into. I should also mention the reason that you and your army can die so quick when encountering bosses is because the normal enemy army spawns continuously as long as the boss is alive, so don't bother getting into your head that you're just gonna kill all the ads and expose the boss for your army to fight them, because they will just keep on coming constantly, and if your army folds and they gain ground, you have to fight back through all those enemies that are still spawning just to get to the boss. Adds more time in for you to reach and kill the boss, and therefore less likely to get money. I did complete Swordsman on normal mode after a fair few attempts with what felt like a lucky run, and it was remarkably easy after all my frustrating failed attempts, but as said, it's because I ended up hitting the right boxes and the format of the game layers that. Good buffs led to fast kills, led to more money, led to faster and better buffs due to less manpower loss and more money to spare at the end. Playing as the archer is far easier. You have less maximum health, but because you don't have to be right next to your enemy to hit them, you're way safer. It also negates the archer issue in the cave dungeon level because you can hit enemies over gaps, meaning you don't have to just weather the stun and damage trying to get to them and kill the enemy archers. You can just shoot them like they shoot you. Same with the bosses that teleport and are unhittable. If you dodge their damage, you can actually hit them on the retreat because you have a ranged attack, and you don't have the issue of not being able to catch up to them. Your archer abilities are pretty good too. You have a stun, a rapid shot, and the ability to make a decoy archer, which enemy bosses would latch to and which could do damage itself. An upgrade would improve this to a swordsman, which was great to drop right next to bosses to get damage without you having to get close, and it had more health, and had no cost to manpower when it died. Plus, even better, the decoy has exactly the same buffs you do, meaning it's stronger and more powerful than the rest of your army. If you have an ability to give a speed buff to everyone in a certain radius on landing a special ability, you get a radius around yourself and your decoy. You essentially have two of yourself on the field. It took me about 3 runs to complete the game as an archer, with a combo of RNG God Blessing and just the fact that playstyle makes it so much easier to survive. It seems to negate the issues of being trapped by your army and vulnerable to damage. It negates the gimmicks of enemy bosses being able to stun and attack you from distance. It negates the level design, leaving you vulnerable to enemies whilst you can't hit them. All you have to do is the same as the swordsman. Be aware if you're getting too close and taking too much damage, and retreat when you can. The leaderboard for Archer seems to be much less populated than Swordsman, so maybe it's the less popular mode? I don't know. I then gave a go at hard mode with both types. I finished Archer hard mode after 2 attempts. I did however encounter some glitches in Archer hard mode on both runs. On the first run I got to the desert level and my army completely glitched out, spawning in and running backward away from the enemy, leading to me being stranded on my own. They'd engage enemies at very short distance when they kept running towards my army and reach them, but all of them would just spawn and immediately run away instead of following me, even with all the enemies dead. I had another glitch that nearly game-ended me on my winning run, right on the last level, which was incredibly frustrating. I had the swordsman decoy with E, and that also glitched, and every time I summoned it, it would run away from the fight down the map and just keep running against a wall consistently. It would not fight at all, no matter how much I respawned it, effectively losing me one of my abilities. And considering I was in a fight with 2 bosses at the time, it was ridiculously bad timing. Luckily, I did manage to finish and got second on the leaderboard. After about 5 attempts at Swordsman, I still haven't done it. I had a promising run once or twice, but it got to a point where one enemy boss with a freeze, shock crowd on hit, and vampiric heal on kill ability with ridiculous damage just sliced through my army and me in seconds, enough to completely destroy my run. I'll admit it had already been going downhill, as my last level had finished with me on not enough manpower to replace my full army, but that was just murder. There are a couple of minor things that I notice. If you open a chest and you don't like any of the items in it, then too bad, you have to take one. The most annoying chest for this is the first one you come across at the top on the first level, since inside there is always an alteration for your special attacks, and whilst the game considers these better, actually there are some that are worse or don't match your playstyle. For example, a leap ability that just leaves you stranded in the middle of a crowd of enemies after you jump into them. It says it's 100 coins for 100 manpower in the shop, but the game doesn't deduct manpower in tens, so that means you may need to buy 247 men, but you're still paying 300 coins. Or going back into battle with 953 men, because it doesn't do smaller values, so technically you lose 50 coins paying for nothing if you want to get back up to the full 1000. You may think from the amount of ranting that I hate the game. I won't lie, it is frustrating, and mostly because a lot of that has to do with luck being the main dictator of balance, and the system not giving you any chance to avoid a downward spiral if you don't manage to achieve either a good amount of money, minimal manpower loss, or good enough buffs. And it doesn't help you at all in that all of these issues feed into each other. Once you're on the back foot with one, it's goodbye from there. It's true to call it challenging. Unfair? Maybe. The Archer playstyle balances a lot of the issues I have with the Swordsman playstyle while still leaving the responsibility on you to not get greedy or overconfident and expose yourself to damage. As the Swordsman, you don't really have much choice to not expose yourself to damage, since you have to be on the front line to land a hit, but yes, it's still incumbent on you to not be greedy and retreat as required. Though the game also has many ways to kill you even if you do retreat, including teleporting bosses right next to you, shooting ballista miles down the map, archers, or teleporting boss archers. The planning aspect is good in idea, and it gives you a couple of options. It's a balancing act with how you spend your money at the end, if you choose to sacrifice manpower replenishment for buffs, or vice versa, but if you make the wrong choice, your run is over. Which buffs you choose is also important. It's all well and good making yourself a damage-dealing god whose buffs all apply to yourself and your special abilities, but that's very useless when you have to dive away to heal every 10 seconds because your defense is bad, and your armies are getting cut through because you aren't there to support them. Similarly, too high defense doesn't help for the same reasons. It's great that you aren't dying, but if you can't help kill bosses, your army is just going to die faster instead. Crowd control abilities are very important, and with enough of them you seem to do better. The level design is mostly pretty good, apart from the funneling sections, and the game is simple to pick up and play. Functionally, the game does what it's meant to, apart from those couple of glitches I had on hard mode Archer, but I got nearly 5 hours play out of my testing, and that's all I encountered in that time. Saying all I have, I still did get 5 hours out of it, and it's not yet complete, which is a likely testament to how well it can immerse you, even if that immersion is frustration and retrying. The leaderboards give you replay reason, and the 4 modes do give you some variety in play, as does the playstyle difference between the archer and the swordsman. The levels are the same, and I believe so are the bosses from what I've seen, so it may get a bit predictable, but for a 9-person made project, it's easy to get hooked on given the simple motive and control system. It won't knock your socks off with graphics due to simple textures, copy-paste allies and enemies, and about 4 variants of boss design, but at least the music was changed for each mode and fits the environment fairly well. The menu is just simple text, but really it doesn't need anything fancy to do what it wants to do. I have a feeling that the RNG aspect is something that you have to just take at face value. Bad luck sucks and will end you the game, and it's easy to see that end coming when it starts. The annoying part is there's nothing you can do about it, so you either quit and restart the run, or just prolong the inevitable for a bit knowing you're never gonna make it. I'm not sure what could balance this loss. Perhaps a low chance of a random coin drop or something to give you a chance to bounce back. If you're losing too hard, it probably would not help enough, but at least it's some form of mitigation. I don't know. The setup works fantastically if you're on a good streak, but it also kills you fast if you're not. It wouldn't be good to make the game too easy, but I don't think a small feature to balance would cause that much impact. So, what to give the game? I'm pretty torn on this one. It's not majorly flawed or unenjoyable for bad reasons, so it has to be a positive score. I had more fun playing Archer than Swordsman, but unfamiliarity with the game style means I might end up being harsher than planned because of critiquing key factors of the game. Since I can't use visuals or environment really to sway the decision, it all falls on the mechanics and the gameplay. It's not a bad game, in fact it's great at what it intends to do, and the abilities seem pretty balanced. It's just that good theoretical base comes with the catch that you're victim to a chaotic brain behind the running of the buff system, and have no way to protect from or balance it. I think I'm going to settle on a 7 out of 10. It gets the framework right even if it dresses it up in the spare pixels it found in a box in the shed, and I suppose you just have to make peace with the RNG gods, and the fact that they will likely have the ultimate say in your success or failure. It's equal parts immersive, challenging, and frustrating, for me at least, but I'd still recommend it to give it a try and see what you think.